$14.23 an hour. That is what Marcus earned driving a delivery route for a linen supply company in rural Mississippi. He worked 5 days a week, sometimes 6 when they needed extra runs to nearby towns, hauling bags of restaurant tablecloths and hotel sheets in a box truck with no air conditioning and a cracked windshield that nobody ever fixed. After taxes, his biweekly check came to roughly $940. Average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in his county sits around $850 a month. Add in utilities, a phone bill, gas to get to work, and food, and the math does not leave room for a deposit, first and last month's rent, or the credit check fee that most landlords charge before they even consider your application. Marcus had been sleeping in his truck, not the company truck, his own vehicle, an old pickup with a camper shell over the bed that he had bought off a coworker for $600 the year before. He parked it behind a closed restaurant along a rural highway where the owner let a few people use the gravel lot at night as long as nobody caused problems. He kept a sleeping bag, a plastic bin of clothes, and a battery-powered fan in the truck bed. On summer nights in Mississippi, when the humidity sits at 90% and the temperature barely drops below 80 after dark, he would lie on top of the sleeping bag with the tailgate cracked and stare at the corrugated metal ceiling 6 inches above his face. He had been on a housing wait list for 11 weeks. The closest shelter with open beds was over 60 miles north, which would have meant quitting the linen job because the morning route started at 5:30 and there was no way to make that commute. A motel room at $60 a night would eat his entire paycheck in 16 days. So Marcus did something that sounds impossible when you first hear it. He decided to build a house. Not someday when things settled down, not after saving for a year. Right then, with $180 in his checking account and whatever he could find, borrow or pull out of a dumpster within driving distance of his county in rural Mississippi. What he built over the next 14 weeks is not a shack. It is not a tarp lean-to nailed to a couple of trees in the woods behind a gas station. It is a 10 by 12 foot weatherproof structure with insulated walls, a rainwater collection system, a propane cooking station, a locking front door, and an interior layout that includes a sleeping platform, a storage wall, and a small work surface where he eats his meals and reads at night by the glow of a solar-powered LED strip. He built the entire thing for $173, and he has not paid rent in over 3 years. This is exactly how he did it. Every material, every source, every workaround from start to finish. Because the system Marcus developed, mostly through trial and error and conversations with other people in similar situations, is far more sophisticated than anyone would expect from a man working with almost nothing. The first problem was not construction, it was materials. You cannot build a structure without lumber, fasteners, roofing, and some form of moisture barrier. At retail prices, even the cheapest prefab shed kit at a big box hardware store runs over $1,200 before tax. Marcus had $180. That rules out virtually every conventional path. But conventional paths are not the only ones that exist. And Marcus figured that out fast. Construction sites across rural Mississippi follow a predictable waste cycle that almost nobody outside the trades pays attention to. When a framing crew wraps up on a new residential build, the offcuts, warped studs, damaged sheets of oriented strand board, and short pieces of 2x4 lumber get thrown into roll-off dumpsters that sit on the job site for 2 to 3 days before a hauling company picks them up. Marcus learned the rhythm from a guy he met at a church meal on a Wednesday night. The man had worked framing houses for 15 years before a back injury put him out of the trade. He told Marcus which new subdivisions were actively pouring foundations, which days the framing crews finished walls and moved to the next lot, and what time those crews packed up and drove home. Marcus started driving to those construction sites after 6 in the evening, when the tools were locked up and the lots were empty. A single residential construction dumpster in a new housing subdivision can contain 20 or more usable 2x4 sections, half sheets of plywood with minor water damage on one face, and bundles of blocking and bracing cut to odd lengths that were perfectly sound but too short for the original build. Over 4 weeks of evening runs, loading what he could fit in the truck bed and strapping longer pieces to the roof rack, he collected enough framing lumber to build every wall of his planned structure. His total fuel cost for those trips was about $30. The second source was a discount building supply store that sells donated and salvaged materials at steep markdowns. Marcus found a solid exterior door with a working deadbolt for $12. Bags of mixed screws and nails went for $2 or $3 each. And on one visit, he found a stack of corrugated metal roofing panels, lightly rusted on the edges but fully functional, pulled from an old barn teardown. The entire stack cost him $35, enough to cover his planned roof with extra for overlap. But the single most productive material source Marcus tapped was the informal pallet network that runs through every rural county in Mississippi. Feed stores, farm supply depots, small manufacturers, and food distribution warehouses stack used wooden shipping pallets behind their buildings by the dozens. Most of them will let you take as many as you want if you show up and haul them yourself. A standard 40 feet by 40-inch wooden shipping pallet, when you take it apart carefully, gives you 6 to 8 usable boards plus additional bracing strips. Marcus collected over 50 pallets over a 3-week stretch, loading 5 or 6 at a time into the truck bed and driving them back to the build site. Taking wooden pallets apart without destroying the boards is a skill that takes practice. Marcus cracked and split the first 15 or so, trying to force them apart with a claw hammer. A woman he met at a food pantry showed him a better method. You score along the nail line on each board with a sharp utility knife, then slide a flat pry bar in at a shallow angle and work it slowly back and forth. The boards pop free with the grain intact. Marcus got efficient at it. By the end of the second week, he could break down a full pallet into usable lumber in about 12 minutes, sitting on an overturned bucket in the shade of a tree at the edge of the property where he would eventually place his cabin. His total material cost at that point came to $30 in fuel, $35 for the roofing panels, $12 for the door, $15 in fasteners and hardware from the supply store, and $8 in caulk and expanding foam from a dollar store. That left him roughly $73 in reserve from his starting budget. Now he needed a place to put the structure. And this is the part of the story that surprises people who have never spent time in rural Mississippi. Marcus did not hide his cabin in the woods behind a commercial property. He did not squat on public land or tuck a structure into a tree line where nobody would notice it. He knocked on doors. Across rural Mississippi, there are thousands of acres of privately owned land sitting completely unused. Old hayfields that have not been cut in a decade, wooded parcels behind farmhouses owned by elderly people who cannot keep up with the brush, land inherited by families who moved away years ago and visit maybe once a year to check on a fence line. Marcus approached an older man who owned several acres of partially wooded land along a quiet county road. The lot had a small house on the front portion where the man lived alone. The back acreage was overgrown with scrub pine and wild bramble that had not been cleared in years. Marcus explained his situation honestly. He asked if he could place a small structure in the back corner of the property, out of sight from the road, in exchange for clearing the brush, maintaining the fence line, and keeping the drainage ditch along the property edge clean so it would not flood during heavy rains. The man said yes. No lease, no written contract. A verbal agreement between two people who both needed something the other could provide. This kind of informal land use arrangement is common across the rural South in ways that people in cities do not see or understand. The property owner gets free land maintenance and the peace of mind that comes from having someone nearby keeping an eye on things. The person placing the structure gets a place to exist without the financial burden of rent or the legal uncertainty of squatting. County building codes in most rural Mississippi jurisdictions do not require permits for accessory structures under 120 square feet that are not connected to municipal water or sewer. Marcus planned his cabin at 10 by 12 feet, 120 square feet exactly on the exterior measurement, which in some counties falls right at the threshold. He kept the interior footprint intentionally at 110 to leave no room for dispute. That math was deliberate. He had spent 3 afternoons at the local public library reading county ordinances on a desktop computer before he chose his dimensions. The foundation went down first. 16 salvaged cinder blocks arranged in a 4x4 pier grid, leveled with a borrowed 4-foot level, and packed sand underneath each block. The pier foundation lifts the floor frame 8 inches off the ground. That gap prevents moisture from wicking up into the wood, allows airflow underneath to discourage rot, and eliminates any need for a poured concrete slab, which would have been both expensive and almost certainly permit triggering. The floor frame was built from the heaviest salvaged 2x4s Marcus had collected, doubled up at the perimeter and cross-braced with pallet wood on 16-inch centers. Plywood sheets with cosmetic staining from the construction site dumpsters formed the subfloor. Marcus sealed every joint in the subfloor with expanding foam sealant to block drafts from coming up through the pier gaps below. Wall framing followed the same hybrid approach of salvaged dimensional lumber and pallet wood, vertical studs at 24-inch spacing rather than the standard 16-inch residential spacing. That wider spacing uses less material and remains fully adequate for a single-story structure under 120 square feet that does not need to meet residential load-bearing standards. The pallet boards, thinner than standard sheathing, but surprisingly rigid when fastened tightly, covered the exterior frame as a wall skin. The roof was the most important weatherproofing element of the entire build. Marcus built a single-slope shed-style roof, higher at the front wall and angling down toward the rear, which directs all rainwater away from the entrance and toward the back of the cabin, where he later placed his collection barrel. The corrugated metal roofing panels went down over a framework of salvaged 2x4s with a 2-inch overhang on every side. He sealed every screw hole and every panel overlap seam with silicone caulk. That caulk and the expanding foam he used around the door frame and window opening were the only materials he purchased at full retail price. The weatherproofing layer beneath the exterior pallet boards made the biggest difference between a structure that leaks and one that stays dry. House wrap, the white synthetic sheeting that goes under exterior siding on residential construction, shows up regularly in construction site dumpsters in large usable pieces. Builders cut it with generous overlap and toss the excess. Marcus collected enough house wrap sheeting to cover every exterior wall of his cabin beneath the pallet board sheathing. He stapled it to the framing with a borrowed staple gun, overlapping each piece by at least 6 inches and sealing every seam with strips of duct tape. The first major thunderstorm hit 3 days after he finished wrapping the walls. Mississippi thunderstorms in late spring are violent. Horizontal rain driven by wind gusts that rattle metal roofing like someone shaking a sheet of tin. Marcus stood inside the cabin that night and listened to the storm hammering the roof panels above his head. Rain ran down the exterior pallet boards, hit the house wrap layer underneath, and shed straight to the ground. Not a single drop came through. For the first time in nearly a year, he was dry during a rainstorm without being inside a vehicle. The interior systems are where the real thinking shows. a 55-gallon food-grade plastic barrel sourced free from a restaurant equipment supplier that was discarding drums that had held cooking oil, sits beneath the low end of the roof line at the back of the cabin. A short section of aluminum rain gutter directs rainwater from the roof edge into the barrel through a piece of wire mesh screen that catches leaves and debris. Annual rainfall across southern Mississippi averages over 55 inches. That volume, collected even partially, provides more than enough water for cooking, drinking, and cleaning when supplemented by occasional refills from public water sources in town. Marcus purifies collected rainwater by adding a small, measured amount of unscented household bleach per gallon and letting it sit for at least 30 minutes before use. His annual cost for water purification comes to about $3 in bleach. He stores treated water in cleaned plastic jugs lined up along the interior wall near the cooking area. When the barrel runs low during dry stretches, he fills jugs at a public water fountain at the local library, the same library where he researched building codes before he started construction. Cooking runs on a single-burner propane camp stove he bought for $19 at a clearance sale. A 16-ounce propane canister lasts roughly 2 hours of cooking time. At about 1 canister per week, his annual cooking fuel cost comes to around $130. He cooks outside the front door on clear days and inside with the door cracked open for ventilation during rain. Lighting comes from battery-powered LED lanterns and a small solar panel charger that sits on the south-facing edge of the roof during daylight hours and powers a USB LED strip inside the cabin at night. Both items came from a dollar store. Total cost for his interior lighting system was about $8. Heating during Mississippi winters, which can drop into the 20s Fahrenheit on the coldest nights, relies on a combination of the cabin's small interior volume, insulated walls, and body heat. Marcus insulated the interior walls with layers of flattened cardboard boxes and old blankets pinned between the studs, creating dead air pockets that trap warmth the same way double-pane windows do. On the coldest nights, the property owner runs an extension cord from his outdoor electrical outlet to the cabin, and a small ceramic space heater brings the interior up to a comfortable temperature within minutes. The floor received a layer of salvaged carpet remnants over the plywood subfloor, which cut the cold transfer from the ground dramatically. The total construction cost when Marcus finished the build was $173. He had $7 left over. The entire project took 14 weeks, built in the evenings after his delivery routes and on Sundays when the linen company was closed. That was over 3 years ago. Since then, Marcus has made steady improvements. He added a second window, pulled from a house renovation down the road. He built a small covered front porch from additional pallet lumber. He installed a rain barrel overflow system that channels excess water into a shallow drainage trench, rather than letting water pool against the foundation. Inside, he built shelving from pallet boards and metal brackets to hold canned food, tools, and a growing collection of paperback books. Marcus still works. He moved from the linen company to a warehouse position that pays $16 an hour. The money that would go to rent instead goes to food, fuel, a savings account he opened 18 months ago, and slow material accumulation for a larger structure he plans to build on the same property. The landowner has already agreed, but the part of this story that extends far beyond one man in Mississippi is this: Marcus is not an anomaly. The methods he used, some taught to him, some figured out on his own, match construction techniques that have shown up in at least 35 documented self-built structures across rural Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia over the past several years. The knowledge moves, the way survival knowledge has always moved, person to person, food pantry line to food pantry line, church supper to church supper, free clinic waiting room to free clinic waiting room. A caseworker in central Mississippi described encountering 5 separate families living in self-built structures, on rural properties with verbal land use agreements. Each family had independently arrived at almost identical building methods, same pallet wood sourcing from feed stores and warehouses, same construction dumpster timing after framing crews finish residential builds, same county code research to stay beneath permit square footage thresholds. One family in rural Alabama connected two separate sub-threshold structures with a covered breezeway, effectively doubling their living space while keeping each individual building below the permit line. A man in South Georgia said he learned the entire foundation and framing sequence from a stranger he met at a charity meal service. The woman had drawn the floor plan and pier layout on the back of a paper plate with a ballpoint pen. These methods work specifically in rural areas for reasons that do not translate to cities. Available land with willing owners, minimal code enforcement, lower visibility, access to agricultural and industrial waste streams that produce free building materials, neighbors who are more inclined to help than to report someone to a code enforcement office. The question that comes up every time people hear about builds like these is whether this represents a housing solution or a housing system failure. The honest answer is that it is both things at the same time. Nobody should have to build their own shelter from salvaged lumber and construction waste while sleeping in the back of a pickup truck. But the fact that people do it and have independently developed methods that are genuinely effective reflects a kind of practical intelligence that deserves to be documented and taken seriously rather than waved off as mere desperation. Marcus put it in simple terms when asked what the experience taught him. He said that everyone assumes you need money to have a roof over your head, but what you actually need is a patch of dirt, materials that other people already threw away, and enough patience to figure out how things fit together. The money is what the system tells you is required. The dirt and the patience are what actually build the walls. What Marcus constructed for $173 in rural Mississippi has outlasted rental apartments that cost 10 times that amount every single month. It has survived 3 hurricane seasons, summer heat indexes above 110 degrees, and winter cold snaps that froze the water in his collection barrel overnight. And the man who once ate cold sandwiches in the cab of a pickup truck behind a closed roadside restaurant now cooks hot meals on a propane stove inside a cabin he built with his own hands, under a metal roof that keeps every drop of Mississippi rain exactly where it belongs, on the outside. If resourcefulness like this matters to you, subscribing helps more people find this video, and the video on screen right now documents a completely different off-grid survival build with methods just as creative as the ones you just heard. Click it and keep going.